president just days ago had said that he was not happy with Vladimir Putin. What happened?
I think that there's been a number of public statements, but also the days before we heard that President Trump backs up the decision of Senate to vote and pass the bill on sanctions and putting more restrictions on Russia, exactly because Russia is not committed to any progress to a dialogue. What I can say that our negotiating teams are keep on working, and as both presidents, President of the United States and President of Ukraine, confirmed that the peace proposal, which is on the table, is 90% agreed. So as it was many times before, Ukraine is working round the clock to pursue any path towards ending the war. And let me also remind one thing, which is an obvious fact. If Russia would withdraw its military force from Ukraine, the war would end next morning. We were attacked 4 years ago, almost. My house, my family were attacked with the bombs, and the military invasion started from Russian and Belarus territory. The moment Russian troops are off, the war is over.
Madam Ambassador, I am just struck to think that we could be entering a fifth year of this conflict. And you might have heard our conversation before you joined us talking about President Trump's designs on Greenland and the back and forth that we're seeing now within NATO over this territory. Denmark has said any action against Greenland would mean the end of NATO, and we don't know exactly how this is going to end. I just wonder, does a world without NATO leave Ukraine less secure?
Well, in Ukraine, we joke that we are always happy to welcome NATO joining Ukraine. And, you know, unfortunately, we are not the member of NATO, but we have managed to pursue our own security. As far as I'm aware, Danish foreign minister was happening to be in Washington. He had talks. Both sides have heard each other, and they're about to draw their conclusion and continue the dialogue. We don't think it should be a matter of such drama, and I think there are actual drama happening in Ukraine, while, you know, the casualties among civilians increased 40% since the beginning of 2025, and this is where we can take real effort to stop it from happening.
Madam Ambassador, after President Trump did say that he believes it is President Zelensky standing in the way of peace right now, is there any rush to lessen a reliance on the United States?
Well, I think one thing we managed to accomplish, and I think it's a very serious deliverable throughout 2025, that we have a permanent, regularly, on a daily basis, working groups represented by Rustem Umerov and Kirill Budanov on our side, and Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner on the American side. We have a good dialogue with Secretary of State, with all the team, and with President Trump, and both, I'm sure, President Trump and moreover, President Zelenskiy are always open to discuss any issue which may arise, any concern, and we have no concern on our side because our commitment is unwavering, and it's our people who are dying, and it's absolutely not possible to consider any option which would speak opposite to Ukraine's willingness to end the war. And it's not something that only President Zelenskyy communicates. He communicates on behalf of people of Ukraine, and I think that's what really, really matters.
So after hearing those words from the president, what do you believe is the best way to move forward in this relationship?
I think we don't consider any step as something undermining any efforts on any side. Our teams will continue working together, and over the next 2 days, you will see another round of dialogue, and we will be able to have and hear the communication afterwards.
Ambassador, I want to ask you about the state of affairs on the ground. We can talk about politics all day, but our audience is curious to know what's happening inside Ukraine, where I know that you and the Russians have been trading major drone attacks. But most recently, you referred to the killings of civilians. Russia's been striking Ukraine's energy grid of late. I just checked. It is 6 degrees right now in Kyiv. Considering the major blackouts that you've seen in the country, are you getting the power back on?
Well, you're rightly saying we're facing the coldest winter in the last decade, and again, when we're speaking, saying the war of Russia against Ukraine, we should not forget that this is not something only something that's happening on a front line. Over this winter, it has become a war against people, against families and children, against our way of life. As I've said, more than 40% increase of losses among civilians as a result of these attacks. The attacks are directly targeted on the electricity infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and water supplies, meaning just depriving dozens of millions of people from ability to live their life in Ukraine. I think it's nothing short of a terror, and it's far beyond the war. It's the aggression, and it's a terror, and it simply has nothing to do with the Christian values President Putin keep on repeating in his public statements. It has something very different.
Ambassador, just lastly, are there any plans for President Zelensky to return to Washington to visit the White House?
I think it's like all of us have already learned that probably I'm the ambassador, the only ambassador of Ukraine in the world who is welcoming President Zelensky every month in the United States, and I'm always on a standby. He's willing to come back. Teams are working on the security guarantees and building the choreography on that. I think the earliest opportunity for presidents to meet would be Davos, and that will pave the way towards the next steps in the calendar.